Hi students, and welcome to this introduction to the Scarlet Letter. So what's this book about anyway? Well, it's about a lot of things. It's about human nature versus the institution man puts in place to suppress human nature. It's about forbidden love at a time when it wasn't just frowned upon, it was illegal. It's about the heavy toll guilt and secrets take on a person's body, mind, and soul, and it's a collision between faith and morality and the terrible decision of which one to listen to. It's also about so much more, as you're going to find out. Some key facts about the novel. Full title is The Scarlet Letter, written by Nathaniel Hawthorne, published in 1850. It's set in the Massachusetts Bay Colony in Boston in the years 1642 and 1649. There's a 7-year gap in between chapters 4 and 5, or 5 and 6, if I recall. The point of view, it's told from the third person. The narrator is omniscient-ish. The narrator certainly seems to know more than any person participating in the narrative should, but is still somewhat limited. The narrator is actually a character based on Hawthorne himself, who is established in the Custom House sketch that you're going to read. The genre, it is fiction, it is a novel, it is semi-allegorical, it is historical fiction, and it is romantic fiction. Let's talk about Nathaniel Hawthorne himself. He was born in 1804 in Salem, Mass. He died in 1864 in New Hampshire. Did not live long, of course. That was probably average old age back then. He died actually on while he was taking a trip with his best friend Franklin Pierce to New Hampshire. Died on the way there. His health was failing anyway. Her early careers, he was a magazine editor. He was, for a time, the weigher and gauger for salt and coal for the Customs House in Boston. And then, as you're going to read about, he was a Customs House official in Salem. His other writing, in addition to Scarlet Letter, Twice Told Tales, published in 1837, was a collection of short stories. The Scarlet Letter came along in 1850. It was his first romance, but he wrote 2 more romance novels after that, The House of the Seven Gables and The Blithedale Romance. And when we talk about romance, again, we're using the broader definition of romance, not our modern connotation. When we hear romance in modern context, we think of love story. Well, yeah, it might feature a love story, but that's not what romance actually means. A piece of romantic literature just means a piece of literature that's not realistic. It's meant to be kind of fantastic. It's meant to indulge in kind of ideal presentations of things, mystical things, that sort of thing. So yeah, just when you think of romance, think the opposite of realism. Don't think of people falling in love. That's not what it actually means. Right, some motivations behind the Scarlet Letter. Hawthorne, like a lot of writers, struggled financially for most of his life, and just like writers nowadays, writers then often had to take jobs just to support their writing. Unlike now, writers then who seemed to have promise were sometimes supported by patrons or given patronage jobs. Patrons being wealthy individuals who didn't really have anything good to do with their money, so they would just support an artist or a writer that they felt had talent, and put that writer up, give them a place to live, give them living expenses so that they could spend all of their time writing. By the time Hawthorne came around, there weren't so many patrons for artists as there were patronage jobs, jobs given to writers and artists that were typically part-time, that they could earn a livable wage, but at the same time still give them plenty of time to create their art. In 1846, Hawthorne's best friend Franklin Pierce helped him get one such patronage job, made him surveyor for the District of Salem and Beverly and inspector of the revenue for the Port of Salem. That really long title was actually a pretty important title within the customs world of the Port of Salem, and he wasn't something he was previously unaccustomed to. Remember that he worked in the customs office for the Port of Boston before that, but it was a patronage job. It was not a passion of Nathaniel Hawthorne's at all to work in the government. It was just he needed a way to make money, earn a living for his family while he could still write, and this was a part-time job. He only worked mornings. Government work, however, as you can imagine, did not suit him. He was an artist in every sense of the word. He worked in the Salem Custom House for 2 years and considered it the worst period for his writing in his entire life. He actually wrote to Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, "I'm trying to resume my pen. Whenever I sit alone or walk alone, I find myself dreaming about stories as of old, but these forenoons in the custom house undo all that the afternoons and evenings have done. I should be happier if I could write." So during this time period, Nathaniel Hawthorne, very unhappy, very unproductive as far as his writing goes. Fortunately, Hawthorne's post, I say fortunately, kind of ironically, Hawthorne's post was federally appointed and subject to the spoils system. So it was federally appointed, meaning as political parties changed in the White House, different people could take this office. Hawthorne was a Democrat, although he was not political at all. He was just a registered Democrat. His relationship with Franklin Pierce, who would later become a Democratic president, was personal, not professional. He was not a politician. He was not a supporter of politics. Nevertheless, when President Tyler became president in 1848, Tyler being a Whig, he dismissed Hawthorne and replaced him with a member of the Whig Party. Hawthorne wasn't the sole target of this attack. Tyler didn't have anything against Hawthorne himself, other than the fact that Hawthorne was just of the opposing political party. And it was part of Tyler sort of cleaning house, as a lot of presidents do. Hawthorne, even though he secretly hated the job, he felt publicly humiliated, and he was. He had done a good job. He was by all accounts a good surveyor, yet he was very publicly ousted when this new president came to power. Hawthorne fired back after his ousting with a letter in the Boston Daily Advertiser, which was then attacked by Whig supporters. And this little squabble over one little surveyorship in a port that really didn't even see much trade anymore became much talked about throughout New England. Kind of became good political gossip throughout New England. Shortly after his ousting, Hawthorne's mother died. Hawthorne called it the darkest hour he ever lived. And it was this melancholy mood combined with the righteous indignation he felt over losing his job that sort of fueled his penning of the Scarlet Letter. It was kind of this perfect storm of feelings to create one of the greatest works of art we have. At the heart of this novel are contrasts between what individuals feel is right and what their community tells them is right. The unsympathetic Puritans that you're going to read about in the novel are likely representative of the politicians who removed Hawthorne from office. The Puritans in the novel made their decisions purely based, or excuse me, the politicians who fired Hawthorne made their decisions purely based on their politics, ignoring how well Hawthorne did his job. So if you look in terms of the novel, substitute politics for the Puritan faith, and substitute Hawthorne's poor treatment by the Whigs for the protagonist's poor treatment by the Puritans in the Scarlet Letter, you see that this is a somewhat inspired by autobiographical treatment. It's inspired to be Hawthorne, it's inspired by Hawthorne's sort of feelings toward this point in his life when he was ousted from public office. Yeah, the novel also can be viewed as a criticism of partisanship in general. There's a lot of different things you can take out of this novel. Here's what I like to look at, because I'm all about trying to find the social criticism in things. So this can be viewed as a criticism of partisanship. Partisanship is when you blindly side with the beliefs of a group you're a part of, as opposed to reasoning something out for yourself. Like our politicians today, who sort of vote just with their parties, not because it's what they believe, but because there is more strength in numbers, and it means that they have a better chance of getting reelected. Just like that, throughout the Scarlet Letter, the protagonists are persecuted, are punished by these by the members of the Puritan community, even though to us, to the reader, the protagonists are so incredibly sympathetic people. Yet, for some reason, no one else in the novel seems to feel this. Everyone seems to be just sticking blindly to their Puritan beliefs and the laws that their community established without any wiggle room for this given situation. So that is one way in which, as you're reading along, you can sort of see how Hawthorne's kind of situation in his life contributed to the criticism he was trying to portray in the Scarlet Letter. Its critical success, the novel was incredibly successful. Hawthorne did not have to get another government job after this, thank goodness. Many consider the Scarlet Letter to be the first great work of American literature. Even scholars today would call the Scarlet Letter the first great piece of literature to come out of the United States. And at the time it was published, it was widely considered to be the best novel ever written. And keep in mind, you had Dostoevsky writing at this time in Russia, you had Charles Dickens in England writing wildly popular novels at this time, but here Nathaniel Hawthorne from the United States, who hadn't put out anything good on the world scene, came out with the Scarlet Letter, and all of a sudden it was a worldwide hit. And it kicked off the grand tradition of the American novel. And since then, the American novel has been the dominant form of novel in the world. The Americans write the best novels in the world. At the time it was published, it was also almost entirely well received, I should say. Some complained of its sympathetic treatment of an unwed mother, argued that it sort of promoted that level of promiscuity, but these moralizers were overwhelmingly drowned out by the enormous critical acclaim that the Scarlet Letter received. What is the Custom House? You may be wondering what this is. It's a preface, and not all books necessarily have a preface, especially not one that's, as long as several chapters combined. So what is the Custom House? The Custom House is an autobiographical sketch that tells the tale of how Hawthorne came up with the idea for the Scarlet Letter. However, even though it's autobiographical, he calls it autobiographical, it is actually complete fiction. The story he tells in the Custom House never actually happened to him. So really it just serves as this venue for him to criticize his ousting from office. In it you're going to read about what his sort of day-to-day life looked like in the Custom House, who the people were that he interacted with, who his co-workers were, and you see throughout that there's a lot of veiled criticisms leveled against them and the types of people who are employed in government positions. And so keep that in mind as you're reading the Custom House, that although it does create a nice little story, it makes the novel a frame narrative, that is a story within the story, which is something Hawthorne was very fond of. The actual framing of this narrative never happened. Hawthorne did not do what he said he did in the Custom House. It's really just a means for him to criticize those that fired him from office. Let's talk about dark romanticism. The Scarlet Letter is widely considered to be a work of dark romanticism, which was first seen in the early 19th century, but really didn't flourish until the mid to late 19th century. It's another subgenre of romanticism, which came over to the United States from Europe. It's kind of dark romanticism is a sort of counterpart of transcendentalism. If you remember the basic tenets of transcendentalism, you're going to see that dark romanticism sort of takes the opposite approach to that. It's a darker side of romanticism that says, where the transcendentalists said that man and nature are inherently good and that it's only society and its institutions that corrupt the individual. Well, the dark romanticists believe that man and nature are inherently wicked and that society and its institutions are corrupt because they were created by man, who is inherently wicked. You often see anthropomorphized evil in works of dark romanticized characters like Satan, devils, demons, vampires, werewolves, other monsters. You're going to hear a lot about in the Scarlet Letter the New England myth of the black man, which is sort of an anthropomorphized version of Satan in the New World. You probably read about that a lot in Puritan literature and in just New England literature in general. Other dark romanticists you may have heard of: Edgar Allan Poe, very famous poet and storyist. Herman Melville wrote Moby Dick, whose popularity came along right after Hawthorne's. He was good friends with Hawthorne as well. That's all I have for this introduction to the Scarlet Letter. Go ahead and get started, and I hope you enjoy the book as much as I do.